Okay, Harold. Welcome very much to Conversation. We had a program that preceded, was aired yesterday with my dear friend Larry Gell. We were talking about a lot of background to leading up to the current moment. What is this, the day today? It's, what's the month? It's, what's the month?
September 11.
September 11, yeah, September 11. In terms of a lot of people questioning the whole way in which the world operates. There's a lot of people saying we may be coming to a time of qualitative transformation in this time. And so in that order, we're going to talk about it differently, but we're going to be talking in this, and you got a hint about it if you can get to the behind us. We're going to be talking about not only information technology. Larry Gell has a lot of experience in that and understanding of the implications to the sociological, political organization of the planet. And also what's coming now, and is very much in the discussion of virtually the entire intellectual community, is the information technology with the internet and all these kind of things, which has been so central to all the qualitative transformation it's requiring and coming along exponentially, not as arithmetic, but now it's all transmogrifying into the realm of called robotics. And robotics is now being seen as something that's going to eliminate much of the way in which the world organizes itself today, built around the idea of distributing buying power and the ability of the human beings to gain income in order to be able to live a life that could benefit from the technological capability of providing life support for the people in a new and cornucopia kind of way. But it's being blocked because the labor input to production is being seen to be eliminated nearly so, eliminated, let's say, in the decades long, but the implications of it are being seen already in what they call robotics, the robotics movement. And we're going to have at the beginning, maybe we could just start it off, Larry, before we even get into the discussion. We have a 14-minute tape that is that sets this theme from California, and I think maybe if we can set up and run that tape, and then we'll come back and talk about what some of the implications of it are. So let's roll that tape now, about 14 minutes long, about some of the implications of robotics historically and on into the future. Put the volume right up, please. The volume. Way up.
So I love this session because it's truly about the Renaissance, and in fact, my talk today is about the next human Renaissance. And the nice thing about talking about that is we get to go back in history and think about the first Renaissance, which was truly an awakening where art like this came out where it never did before. And in fact, people painted essentially themselves doing the things they wanted to do in the Renaissance, which was truly an awakening of the human spirit and the human mind. But other than that period of time, most of our life is spent working. And we've been working for tens of thousands of years doing different jobs. And we do those different jobs so much that they've become us. In fact, when someone asks you, hey, Mary, what do you do? She says, well, I do this. So much so that even Jesus' father is known as Joseph the carpenter. We become known by the things we're doing, even though this is a job, and we're really only doing it to pay the bills for the most part. That's why we were forced to do this kind of work. So somehow we become known by it, but what happens when it goes away? What happens if humans are obsoleted in the next 50 years for the kinds of jobs that we've always done? Where all this new technology that's coming along changes what we would do every day. So first of all, what would we do? Do we sit home and watch TV all day? I hope not. And number two, how do we define ourselves? Because we've been used to defining ourselves since the beginning of time as what we do. And that's a big change. Now, I first started thinking about this way back in '97. I ran a program, a big project for General Magic, about a $100 million program to replace the secretary and create something called the virtual assistant. And here's a little bit of a video from that time.
Must be the chief. I told Serengeti, my virtual assistant, to put his call through.
Good morning, Jack. I've got the chief on the phone and he says it's urgent. Should I put him through or do you want me to take a message?
Put him through. Chief, I'm in the middle of a massage, a Helga massage.
You have 3 new voicemails, 1 email and 2 faxes. Shall I read them now?
Yes, please.
The first message is from your mother, received today
Yikes. Read me my email messages.
You have email from Frank Huffner, instructor, International Spy School.
The idea was truly to replace what we knew as the assistant at that time. And some of that technology has come along, but regardless of what came along and didn't come along, the big learning we took from that is that people began to treat that machine like Mary, which was what we called her. We called her Mary. And so people called her Mary. They talked to Mary. They said all kinds of obscene things to Mary. That's what they did. And this was a very, very interesting experiment. And it took a lot of horsepower at that time. That's me standing in the operations center at that time. There were dozens and dozens of rows and thousands of computers to make that service work way back in 97. Well, we're going to go back further to the first time we really started to replace humans in jobs, to 1961. This is the first industrial robot that was installed at GM at the time, called the Unimation. It did very, very little. It could weld some joints. And it was about $1 million in today's dollars. But everything in the last few years, mostly driven by cell phones, smartphones, has been driving down so fast down this cost curve that it's changing the way we think about robotics. The sensor prices for gyroscopes and MEMS are just completely driving downward towards zero. That's a gyroscope from 1945 and a gyroscope in 2014. It's just a little thing for $1. And not only that, the transit price, the cost of driving data, of getting data to us, continues to drive downward. It continues to move downward to the point of zero. That is, getting data and moving data is basically free. And the cost of computing has continued to drive towards zero, from $1 trillion to a trillionth of a penny for 1 million instructions per second. Now, all of that adds up to the fact that on our desktop today, we can have a computer that is somewhere between the intelligence of a monkey and a human on our desktop for $200 or $300. And that's not all. We've made great strides in showing that the biggest computers in the world can actually be way smarter than humans. It was back in 1997 that the first computer beat the grand chess champion of the world. And it was only 3 years ago that Watson won against the grand champions of Jeopardy. And this was truly a turning point because of the natural language understanding that had to be embedded in that computer system. That's what was hard. And we finally broke that code in 2011. That's already 3 years ago. So the tipping point isn't near, but it's actually here. In the past, when we looked to outsource labor and to drive down the cost of goods, we would go further and further away from the United States. And eventually we went to China, and all of our goods are made in China. Many of our goods are made in China today. However, just in the last 2 or 3 years, the tipping point has occurred in China, where now robotics and automation are cheaper than the average Chinese factory worker wage. Now, that's a real issue. That's a real issue because there's no further to go. So what happens is the 400,000 people working on your iPhones today might be 40,000 just a few years from now. And in fact, why even make it over there? You can make it here, because if it's all robotics, the cost is the same. And that's a huge tipping point. We have never seen that point before. By the way, we saw the $1 million robot. Here's the $25,000 robot. It does much more than the $1 million robot did, and with a simple software upgrade, doubled its capacity in 1 year. Can you double your capacity with a software upgrade in a year? I can't. This is faster than any human can do the job, and it pays for itself in 1 year, and after that it's free for the next 20. One human can run dozens of these things. His name is Baxter, by the way. So now we're reaching a tipping point where the technology as a whole, computer, sensors, robotics, and communication, are faster, smarter, more reliable than humans already today. They'll work all the time, far less expensively, and they're factual. They don't lie, and they don't guess. We could break down the end of human work into 3 categories: now, soon, and 50 years from now. now, soon, and 50 years from now. And I'm going to pose the fact, in my mind, that in fact all of the jobs go away within the next 50 years. And this is happening already. Over the last 20 years, we've seen routine occupations head downhill as a percentage of our workforce. So more of our workforce is working in more complex opportunities that are using our minds more. Here's an example of restaurant tablets. Many of you have already probably run into this at your favorite restaurant. And what happens is this reduces labor by 40%. You can place your order and you can pay for your order right there. And you don't have to talk to anyone. And it works. It's amazing. Not only that, the customers are happier and the order accuracy is 100%. Now, here's the towel butler that's now at Aloft Hotels. Very, very interesting, because this will deliver warm towels to your room at your beck and call. Can you imagine what happens when you mix the towel butler with what's going on in restaurants, and now it's the food butler? And now the cost of labor goes to 0%, because you don't need a waiter or a waitress. And quite likely, the patrons are even happier. Someone's got to cook, or do they? This is the automatic hamburger machine. It makes burgers for 90% lower cost than the way we make them today, and faster. This is the home kitchen robot. It cooks in the kitchen for you and delivers meals to you. However, it's very expensive. It's only in a lab, but this is what's coming. Over the next 10 to 20 years, we will have a robot in our kitchen. It'll be a few $1,000s. It'll make your meals for you, and it'll also clean while it's not busy making meals. It'll also order the food that morning for delivery fresh. And when you come home at 6, your meal will be there. Yay! And by the way, there won't be a UPS driver or some other driver driving your vehicle to drive your package there, because they're going to be delivered with drones, which eliminates 80 to 90% of package delivery in this country and cuts the labor cost by over 90%. And that's not the only drones. Here's a company that's working on robo-ships, because they figured out that a ship without a captain that might be drinking or might be asleep at the wheel is much safer than one with one. We have GPS, we have technology, we can get the ship from point A to point B. It's not that hard, folks. So now we're going up the chain and further up the chain, and we say, can doctors be replaced by computers? Well, computers have up to the minute millions of peer-reviewed papers, CDC info, data from other computer-based docs, data from social media, data from blood, everything else at its disposal. Hundreds of millions or billions of papers and data, and your doctor can store maybe a few hundred pages in his or her head. So yes, I hope that this happens, because that's the person I want to go to. And let me take it a step further. Human genome sequencing has also fallen from thousands of dollars to it's going to be $1, okay, in the next few years. And at those rates, we will know more about ourselves and our being and how we were born and how we came to be than we've ever known. And a doctor wouldn't know what most of the time to do with all that data. So we're going to actually create more data about our bodies that need to go to the computers and need to go to systems that can analyze it and help us determine how we can live a better life and how we can cure our sickness. But of course, there's surgeons, and there'll always be surgeons. Well, wait, okay, hang on, maybe not. This is the Da Vinci surgical robot. You may have seen that. This is actually run by doctors today. Doctors put their hands in some gloves and manipulate the robot, and then that's what makes the robot operate on your body. I'm sorry, why do I want doctors' hands operating this very delicate instrument? Why wouldn't I want a computer system that can be programmed with all the knowledge of humanity, that can make split-second decisions, literally nanosecond decisions, on hundreds, thousands, or millions of outcomes and take the right one? And by the way, there are some 400,000 people that die every year in this country because of medical mistakes. That's 10 times the number that die in automobile accidents. We can eliminate that. But let's go further. We've all seen the self-driving car. You've seen this on TV. You might have seen one drive by. They're really amazing. But the impact to society is much greater than you think, because technically we just need 92% fewer vehicles, because your vehicle is parked 92% of the time. And if you can drive the cost of getting from point A to point B down below you owning a vehicle, there's no reason to own a vehicle. One will show up autonomously. There'll be no one there. There'll be no one driving it. There'll be no wheel in the car. You get in and it takes you to point B. And this is what happens to New York City taxi fares per mile once you automate. They go from $3 a mile to about 40 cents a mile. And that reduces traffic accidents everywhere in the world by 95%. And it's so safe that I predict that human driving will be outlawed. Because who would want a human behind the wheel? In fact, there shouldn't be a wheel. Think about it. Now, here's an interesting thing. Humanoid robotics companies, the biggest, best, most advanced in the world, almost a dozen have been bought by Google in the last 2 years. What do they know that you don't know? Or rather, what do they know that you didn't know until now? So the question in the future isn't about the perfect job, good salary and benefits and job security and close to home and everything else. That's actually the wrong question we're going to give our kids. Go to school, learn so that you get the perfect job. There won't be a perfect job. It's the wrong question. And I think Bucky Fuller said it best. We should do away with the absolute specious notion that everybody has to earn a living. We keep inventing jobs because of the false idea that everybody has to be employed as some kind of drudgery. You ever feel that way? And the true business of people should be to go back to school and think about whatever it was they were thinking about before somebody came along and told them that they had to earn a living. So that brings us really sort of full circle and suggests to, I think, all of us that, in fact, jobs aren't good. They were a necessary evil, and in fact, they were a form of human bondage. We were enslaved and have been enslaved and continue to be enslaved by the fact we have to get up, we have to go to work, we have to produce something, and then we have to come home. And we're only producing something so that we can put food on our table. Get that. But if that goes away, what if this is the most incredible human opportunity that we've ever seen? That we finally get to ponder, why are we here? I don't mean why are you here listening to me. I mean, why are we here? Because we weren't here to make widgets, to go to some whatever job it is. We're much more capable than that. And that brings us to my final point, which is this is an opportunity that we have, that we've been granted, if we choose to take it, for the next Renaissance. Just as in the first Renaissance, it was an amazing awakening of the human spirit, where people looked to the heavens and pondered what it meant. People looked to the heavens and pondered what it would be and how one would travel to the stars and beyond. People opened up their hearts. They opened up their minds. They created art, dance, music, and theater. This is our possibly one chance that we will be free to do exactly the same thing. I, for one, can't wait, and I hope to see you all there. Thank you so much.
Okay, so that's the thing where we set the thing up, and I don't know, that's something that I think is really on the minds of everybody. So that's something I'd like to think about and put into some sort of a perspective. And what do you think, Larry, listening to that? You've thought these things through and everything. Is there anything to be said for the fact that we may be coming to a new moment in evolutionary terms or something after 200,000 years of our species? We evolved 200,000 years ago out of Homo erectus. And we've had 10,000 generations, more or less. And it may be we are poised in the moment of having a qualitative transformation, not within the Homo sapien experience, which we are all seeing in our historical patterns, but we're coming into the situation of imagine a liberated humanity possibly, which seems to be the way evolution works. You have a steady state and for maybe millennia and so forth, and then there's a quickening like a pregnancy, and there's a quickening and you're introduced into a new way of being in the universe. It's called punctuated equilibrium or a speciation to a new way of being in terms of universe, rather than another historical period in the historical context in which we see things where the systems by which we have gotten our identity have been overcome, if we make it, and that we seem to have been born not like the French Revolution time or the beginning of Rome or something like that out of history, but at a time of qualitative, not quantitative transformation historically into a new way of being in universe. And no wonder there's a good deal of angst. But what do you think we may be at a moment of that, or what do you make of it? You've given a lot of thought to these things, yeah.
Well, okay, well, I like that clip.
Yeah.
And the reason I like that clip is because I've been hearing you saying that all about that clip for how long has it been?
I only came upon the clip a couple of weeks ago. I mean, it's just now. It's just now happening new.
No, I love
it's not. It's the information technology has been going that way.
Yeah.
But the robotics, there used to be a few people, Hans Morgenthau and people at Carnegie Mellon, and they'd have a thing where you got a thing, bring you a cup of coffee.
Yeah.
But it's all the interest of the information guys now is going over to robotics beyond just the information technology. But the implications of it are we're coming to the end of the functions that we have been all caught up with in our wars and our assumptions and the way people live and that sort of thing. It's you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, jobs.
Jobs. Well, did you hear the jobs are like that? But job is a very important thing because that's the way people get identity for one thing.
Right.
Somebody gets a pride, and I suppose that and everything. But it's also the most important thing in terms of the geopolitical order. That's the way people get money.
Yeah.
Most of the people get money. The robots are all owned by a tiny the means of production, which will increasingly be not human input or labor. It's not going to be needed anymore. So the way in which people are going to be going to school to learn something, so they get a certificate, they can get a job within a corporation and earn money and maybe get a grant or something like that, are those things that motivate human activity and thinking are not going to suffice. And yet they would have access, they have the ability, the capability of providing life support to everybody in a Niagara proportion that has never been the case. The idea of scarcity would no longer apply, and that's been the principal assumption of the system. There's not nearly enough for some to win, somebody else has to lose. Zero-sum thinking, all of the things that have made up the geopolitical and the historical context within which all of our thinking is being, all of our assumptions on policy and so forth are being formulated by our so-called leadership, business or governmental now. And there ought to be some attention given to the fact of this qualitative transformation that we have been apparently born into as we get to a point where we're not only our technological capability has brought us the weaponry, which has underscored realpolitik, whoever's got the biggest gun controls, wins in wars and so forth, and enslaves people and all of that. Now the weapon systems are now, and it's modeled, species lethal. We can now kill every single human being with the weapons that could be set off, and we juggle things. We can't stand this, we can't stand that, and it's apparently the case. And on the other side, we got a capability of providing life support for everybody in a have-like kind of way for everybody. We don't have to have have-nots any longer. We've always had to have have-nots to go down in the sewers and do the things, and the untouchables and the other kind of things, and the slaves. We have slave most all of the time. Those things that make up the human condition in history and the current situation is we could take care of everybody and have them be haves in a way like we're heading for. We've got 7 billion people now. We're heading for 10 billion, and so many of them are so not able to realize anything like their real potential because they're all caught up finding roles as slaves within a system that are not going to be needed. And so we have to have a way in which we're going to have to, and that's the way we distribute buying power to the mass of the people who provide a market for what economically we're able to do. And that labor theory of value, which has informed the whole geopolitical process, certainly was the whole basis of Marx thinking and the left and so forth. And we don't have an alternate way of distributing income to the masses of people when their labor, which is bargained away in the process. Do you understand what I'm saying? They're like wage slaves.
Right.
Okay? And they have to do it in order to feed the kids. And it's a sense of responsibility. And we may be in that period of time, they say 50 years, but we're feeling the effects of it already.
So artificial
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, just talk off the top of your head. Yeah.
artificial intelligence,
Yeah.
automation, and now robotics
Robotics, yeah.
will eventually replace all the jobs that are necessary.
Well, yeah, no, but yeah, but
You're beginning to see it.
without losing any of the material benefits of what can be done. You don't need people.
Well, you have quotes all over your website, which I love, and one of them, you got a better memory than me, but one of them I know had to do something about when the weaving machine learns to replace the, what is that quote?
Yeah, when the looms learn to weave.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, yeah,
And
that's.
then there goes the labor part.
Well, that did. It went for
Automation.
the weavers who
Yeah.
used to be able to weave, or the women who would sit around and weave on a machine or something, and the printing press and all the things that, those are all examples. But now it's coming into a crescendo of exponential increasing of the production of the robotics that are going to undercut the labor input to production by which people justify having money given to them for what they do in a productive process where they're no longer needed.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's true, or maybe that's something nobody wants to believe because it's too large and too much out of sync with the historical patterns by which we got all of our values.
Mm-hmm. Well, I just come from Florida, and I have a bunch of friends down there
Yeah.
now that are American airline pilots
Yeah,
and Delta pilots, and a couple of them fly all the way across the world three
Yeah.
times a month.
yeah.
And all they're just talking about is the replacement of their jobs.
Well,
Totally
that's
not only automated cars, but totally automated airplanes.
Oh yeah, I think that there's things that show that the airplanes, the major airplanes, they already are. You got a whole intellect thing that they're all flying in that keeps those all not crashing into each other and everything.
So I like
And
this
it would
point.
be the airlines would be safer if there were no pilots in the airplane.
Like he said, why would you want a human being driving a car when the automation can do it better?
Well, yeah,
Same
but
with
we ask it
airplanes.
in a joking way, but it's
No,
true.
it's serious.
We want to put faith in the guy driving the car, and because we've got these from history.
Yeah.
We got 200,000 years of history where those kind of things are done, and identity, people's identity, are wrapped up in those kind of things. And so this is a major problem confronting. I think this is what's going to become the major thing that's going to be discussed over the decade or so ahead.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why I thought it might be worth talking about.
Yeah. The question is, after this all comes and happens, what are we going to do with all the people when they don't need jobs?
Well, think about it. What do you think?
I don't know, but you're good at that because you've been talking about that for a long time.
Well, it's just that's
Free up the people, use the high intelligence that we've evolved to do greater things in the world. Maybe go to Mars, establish colonies on Mars.
or maybe lead the life of a leisured way of dealing with things without having to do.
Pressure.
Yeah, of doing what you want.
Yeah.
The idea that people could do what they want rather than what they have to do by some system that enforces it. It's like slavery.
Yeah.
Or we will see it from the context of if we have a future, the species or the evolutionary process has a future and we don't. In evolution, most new systems are wiped out.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah, evolutionarily, down the chain of
absolutely.
complexity and everything like that, they're wiped out. The evolutionary
hunters
process.
to
So
agriculture to the industrial revolution, it wiped out everybody who didn't adjust to it.
well, no, but down at the microbic level and everything like that, the whole evolutionary process is a thing of many tried things that do not work, and they are eliminated.
Yeah.
Okay?
Okay.
So
well,
it may be our species is meant to be eliminated.
Yeah.
And the odds are
It
that
has
that
to
might
be.
well be in a godless, in all those kind of things that people believe in, those spiritual things that may or may not be true, most likely are not. They're just stories that gave some sense of identity to a curious humanity and so forth. But it may be we're meant to entropy. And maybe it'll be picked up by something else or something. Entropy will just destroy ourselves.
Yeah.
That happens evolutionarily down at the microbic level in other places routinely. So humanity is being confronted with that, or the upcoming generation, let's just say, or now.
Yeah. So
And to think we're born into that moment of qualitative transformation.
Yeah.
After 10,000 generations, there's something unique about the time in which we find ourselves.
Something blowing in the wind?
Yeah, Bobby Dylan said there's something blowing in the wind. It was being picked up by some of the artists and so forth.
Yeah.
But people mostly are saying, well, how can we get our team to win? How can we get the Democrats to win or the Republicans and do this? And the guy in Korea is going to bring bombs. And all the traditional way of thinking is outdated.
Yeah, and it's all focused around jobs.
Well, it's focused around...
Like you said, you're identified by your job.
Not only identified by your job, but your sense of responsibility. Yeah. You go to school to learn something, and then if you go to university, you go to university to learn, to get a certificate that's going to make it possible for you to get a
job,
called a job,
right,
for which you will get money.
And
the idea is you have to be able to get money by what you do.
Yeah, it's the system forces you. That's capitalism.
Yeah, well,
but you have
not
a
only
great
capitalism, it's socialism too.
Well,
or no, socialism is something else that could be considered. Everything could be done in a mass, just do away with the private sector. But I don't think that's to be advised. I don't know.
You have a great quote on you have so many great quotes on your website. Well, you'll have to refresh my memory, but. Basically, there's a quote on there that basically says capitalism was designed not to help the poor, but to only help the rich.
Well, no, the system was always...
How does that quote goes?
Well,
it's a great quote.
Well, I don't know, really. I don't know. There's so many.
You have a lot of them on there.
Well, I think we don't know what it was like. It's hard to know what it was like in the...
well, right now we got nothing but jobs and the pressure of capitalism that you have to go to school, get a job.
Well, that's the present, yeah.
And now they're saying you might be able to eliminate most and maybe all jobs.
But you don't, but you eliminate, but you do not eliminate the productive capability of goods and services and interest and understanding that is be interesting to the human consciousness.
Because the automation,
including food and all the other things that are done.
What I was gonna say, yeah.
But
after you eliminate the jobs through this automation,
well, then that's
what's the end result? What are the people going to do?
Well,
are they going to disappear like you said?
What's the implication of it all?
Yes.
That's the thing you want to look at, or something, right?
Yeah.
And that's worth considering.
Yeah.
And like when you think about it, I thought we came from Homo habilis. We're all African.
You're
okay,
right.
We agree on that. We're all African. And we all come out of Africa, and it was but apparently it was from Homo erectus. We were all descended of Homo erectus, and we got, it was about 200,000 years ago that our species appeared out of Homo erectus. The means by which those Homo erecti, or whatever it was making up the people there, went through a process of qualitative transformation to have something new. A new species. It's called speciation, a creation of a species.
So you're saying
our species was created 10,000 years ago. Yeah. No, 200,000 years ago from all the best research, all Homo sapiens.
But our system right now is deep in the whole concept of jobs.
Well, yeah, you're back to the immediate thing, and that's what's on people's minds, employment.
All right, let me tell you a little research I've been doing over the past years.
Okay, tell me, yeah.
Because I ran into a father-in-law who ended up with something like $14 million or something, and he never went to school or anything. And he said, which I've been doing, when you see young people walking around on the street and you ask them, what is that big bag you have on the back of your back? And the response is, I have my books in there. And I said, oh, well, what kind of book? Why do you have books in there? And the answer is always the same. Oh, I'm going to school. I'm going to college. And I say, well, why are you going there? They say, get a job.
Yeah.
Fine.
Well,
and I say, well, in my area,
they might be more prosaic and say, I'm going to become a great poet, or I'm going to learn of the great works of literature or something, you know.
Yeah, exactly.
But by and large, and it's a productive
for a job, to do whatever they do.
Well, to get a certificate that gives you a chance to get a job at a place where they're forming capital in a way that has some surplus that they can give you called a salary for what you do to produce the goods that they do.
Right. Now I go to the other side because my agency does projects around the world.
Yeah, I know you're doing that. Yeah.
But
right.
I interact with a lot of universities now.
Yeah.
And when I'm there, I ask them, what do you guys do? And they've all told me the same thing. We're providing jobs. We're teaching.
Wait a minute.
We're teaching
who
jobs.
are you talking about at the university? You're talking about
care who you talk to.
You're talking about the university world now,
Yeah.
or education, higher education.
Yeah, the university world.
Yeah.
I don't care whether it's the deans or whether it's the professors.
Well,
and you say, can you simplify and tell me really simply what are you doing? And the answer always comes up the same. We're teaching jobs. So I say it's just like my ring I have on my finger here.
I see. Yeah, right.
So it's yin and yang. It works
yin-
perfect. You got
yin
man
yang,
and white.
man and
wife.
Up and down.
Yeah,
in and out.
yeah, exactly,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
all the other things associated.
Yeah.
But you got students walking around with books on their back and going
Yeah.
to a university, and you got the universities over there saying, well, we're sitting here waiting for you. We're going to teach you the jobs you're looking for. And then on top of that, they come out with a job. That's step one. But step two is they don't give them jobs. They give them phenomenal debt. $100,000. I've met some guys that went through law school. They said, oh, I got a $200,000 debt. I said, but did you get a job? And the answer is no. And I see people losing jobs. So I've been asking the following question, which I think the audience ought to think about.
Yeah.
The whole because it's related.
Yeah,
to
we
where
all
we're
ought
going.
to think. Yeah, go on. Yeah.
I ask them, you're looking for jobs. The university is teaching the jobs, but does the university teach you what J-O-B, job, spells?
Job. It's Job.
Yeah, I say no. That's not what job spells. In my
Okay.
57 years working in the world of
teach.
jobs,
Yes.
I found job spells just over broke.
Just over broke? Is that what you? Oh,
Yeah.
Have you got that? Wait a minute, everybody. Wait a minute. I'm not sure we should maybe. No, I don't know if we should let the. Have you? I'm going to ask a question right out in the open because
Go ahead.
goddamn, we live in an open society. We don't have to. Have you got that term trademark?
No, I don't.
You get it?
Anybody
Get it trademarked.
you can
You could
trademark
make
it.
a fortune on that, and you could have something. You'd get a chance to fly in an airplane.
Yes, but
and
watch.
all the ladies would be interested in you. All the movements of you'd be a star.
No, what
You'd
this
have
is
a lot of gelt.
what
Gell.
this is pointing to.
Gell.
What this is pointing to. in
Getty gal.
my life has, I've been rich and I've been poor,
Yeah.
and the poor people on the street are just over broke, 1 foot from the
I've
curb.
never heard that term. Don't you understand? It's a unique. Have
Harold,
you got a lawyer?
Harold, you're just
Who's
over.
doing your
You're
law
just
for
over
you?
broke, and I'm just
I'm
over
trying to
broke.
help you. No.
My point is, we're all after jobs, and jobs are a real problem. I've been around the richest people in the world because
know
of my
you have,
clients.
yeah.
And I'm telling you, from the poorest person to me, I'll take it, to me, to everybody I know, right up to these presidents of big corporations who are living in Palm Beach, Malibu's, they're just over
You're
broke.
living in Palm Beach, aren't you?
Yeah,
Down there
near
among
Trump
with
and
all
those
their,
boys.
Right,
Yeah.
you're out right next to Mr. Trump.
Yeah, no, but I've had a lot of clients that live over there, and my understanding and observation over 57 years is they're just over broke too. And the reason is because as they get richer and richer and they keep getting more and more, jobs, and the company grows and grows, a thing that's tagging right along with them, right underneath them, is a thing called expenses. So they're building their income, jobs if are, and their expenses are following them right up. And then if anything happens to them up here in their income over on the Palm Springs or wherever they're, Malibu or wherever they are, if the Chinese come in and take over their company, or they lose their business, or he has a car accident, or he gets cancer, he drops down, the expenses keep going, and before you know it, they
He's
can't
broke.
pay the taxes,
Yeah.
they can't. We're all just overbroke
God,
with
it
jobs.
sounds like a Hollywood movie, man.
No,
That could
but
be,
that's
yeah.
the point. It's the
Yeah.
point of what you said.
Yeah.
We don't
Is it?
need these jobs. We need some way to get escape from the jobs.
Well,
And maybe this video is it.
Well-
We're going to transform this country. It's time to. We don't need this capitalist system. You got 1% of the super rich at the top, and you just push the middle class down and push the bottom class down, because at the top it's simple. Einstein said it years ago.
he was
said,
pretty smart.
Yeah, he said the eighth wonder of the world is compounding interest. And then he had two other sentences, whether I never found anybody remembered them. The second sentence was, he who understands compounding interest is what I said, will learn it. And he said the third question, he who doesn't understand it will pay it. Everybody I know is paying it. And they're paying the banks that compounding interest. And compounding interest means that the super people at the rich at the top, their compounding is massively compounding.
Yeah, really, yeah.
And when it's massively compounding, it's massively pushing down the middle class and the lower class, which are trying to scramble out there to survive with jobs.
Yeah.
And you've been saying for years, we should get rid of the jobs. So I loved it. I was watching you while that clip was on, and you had some nice, confident.
Well, I don't know if we should condemn the modern world any more than all of history, because
No.
it seems to me, well, for that vast period, 200,000 years, that
Yeah, we had
seems
to drop
be
out.
validatable.
We had to drop out of
For
trees and
most
start
of that
walking.
time- for
So-
most of that time, understand that we were hunting and gathering.
Right.
We were wandering around.
We had to do that
And
first.
Africa had a lot of these very, very big, very fast-moving, big-teeth leopards and lions that ate us with regularity, like we eat rabbits. And we were running around hoping to find a little carrion somewhere that we could survive. It was really, really tough in my projection of the way it would have been to lead. And we've only been civilized for it took the invention of agriculture about 10,000 years ago, 8,000 years ago in 4 different places to bring security from the food quest
Yeah.
and made possible civilization. And then as soon as you get civilization, you get somebody becomes the king.
Yeah.
And then you see those. I just saw a little clip on the television about the great pyramids and so forth in Egypt. And you think those people had to drag those great big stones across the hot desert, did it because they wanted to? Now, you can con people into think they're doing it for some god or something like that, but by and large, they were slaves. And what they did is you had the people that had the armies set up a thing where they would go and beat the bejesus out of the people and beat them into submission and turn them into slaves. And you had a few people living in the castle with golden plates, and the slaves were living in slop. And that's the history of the world, and it continues.
And
So it's not unusual that some people have a whole bunch of money and others are just being done what they have to do in order to survive. And that's part of the lesson of learning how to be a human being, is to learn some of the lessons of that. There are some people that are better than others or something, and they're up there in the leadership roles, and you give credence to that. A little bit of a change started happening with the Enlightenment in Europe and so forth. 1,000 years after Rome, you had kings. And the kings it was sovereignty by royal families. They would establish themselves by having a better army and stronger hill, better steel, and winning, and being able to win with realpolitik. If you got the ability to beat the other guy, then you set up the rules. That's all. And it's all very, and you sit up there, and if anybody gets out of sorts, you just cut off their head. Or something like that.
But right here in America, it needed slaves to pick cotton until
That's
Eli
right.
Whitney came along
Yeah.
with his new automation, and it could pick the cotton.
Yeah, but it
itself.
continues. The pattern continues.
Expanding now, though, what you say. We're on the verge of a massive transformation.
Well,
that
no,
may change us totally. is
We're
what you're
right.
saying.
And then evolution, we're all part of an evolutionary process that's
Right.
transforming. And you got these extensions of consciousness that all of the technological things are, and the knowledge and so forth. And then we did have, in Europe for the most part, an enlightenment. and you had an understanding of things, and I think they made a good break from feudalism. There's thousands of years of feudalism in Europe after Rome.
True.
In the United States, Jefferson was a pretty advanced thinker, and so was Benjamin Franklin.
Yeah,
He
all
got a
those
lot
guys.
of thought from the two-row wampum of the Iroquois peoples here, but the native people here were just absolutely ruthlessly decimated by the Europeans after Columbus. Columbus is coming up, Columbus Day again. But the history of the world is a very woeful one by and large, but it was based upon whoever's got the club can hit the others on the head. And win.
Enslave them in jobs.
But then the Enlightenment comes and it begins to get a little more sophisticated and so forth, and you've got a process where it's subtle. You get political systems and things, and then you get the concept of a democracy, and there's something to be said for that. And it could be that the people are feeling better if they've got it all straightened out, that if they do something, their kids can eat.
Yes.
Rather as opposed to if you mess around with our authority, your kids aren't going to eat. They're going to starve to death. You're going to watch them starve right on your, all of that kind of coercion. But they can adjust to it. They adjust to the fact that it's not, there's no such thing. But then they start getting a thing where it's a collectivist thing, and there is a collectivist. I just can't think that those people who drug those great big stones across the desert were doing that for some pleasurable thing. They were slaves, and then they had beasts of burden, and then we get other things. But anyway, they get to that point, and now we got to a point where we have technologies that make possible increased patterns of betterment, and you could have killingry on the one side, and you can have livingry on the other, and we have a capability of, through technological systems and so forth, of providing for more and more of the population on terms that were more like what you would call human. And you got even human rights and so forth.
So here's
People
the
have a
question.
right to clean water. People have a right to have a highway to take their car on. People have the right. You have governments that can begin to be emerging, and you get some progress and the ability to provide life support for the population. You get the wheat fields of the Middle East. You can make mountains of bread, and you can make all kinds of advances and so forth that bring the benefits of the evolutionary process and human activity to where greater numbers of people are what are called haves. We got quite a few people in the world now that are haves as opposed to the slaves out of the historical pattern. And you can finally get to a situation, and there are situations, where everybody is feeling as though they're involved in a thing, a group activity that they're part of. Like, did you ever see guys jam, or guys and gals in a musical metaphor jamming? Mm-hmm. They're jamming, and the guy's playing the sax, the guy's playing the thing, or kids playing, or something sort of a thing where there's a group thing going on, and there's a rhythm to it all, and and they get to a certain point where it's going da 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 da, and then it goes da 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 da. Somebody goes da da da, change a little different, and then they get up there, and there's progress made from a collectivist kind of thing to where more and more people could be in a sense of haveness, and we have the ability that we never had throughout all of history to provide materially for everyone now.
That's
we
my
can
question.
make it so there do not have to be any have-nots.
That's my question.
We have the capability of doing that. We have the technologically augmented capability of having a world where everybody can live out their full potentiality in the way that they would want to do, like in a jam session of a whole species. We have the capability of providing for everybody that we simply never could have done out of the historical pattern, and one which informs practically all of the institutions we try and live by. And so we got to get to a point where everybody can be, in a certain sense, part of a process of liberation.
Are we in a point of scarcity or abundance?
Well, I would say we're at a point, certainly coming out of history, it's always been scarce on a collectivist whole.
And
We're
they tell
now,
us it's scarce
there have been
now.
things where they can say, what is the things that are needed? We can provide we can provide everyone with, in a city like Manhattan, it used to be people had to carry buckets of water up to places, 50 pounds, if you lug water and do all kinds of terribly difficult things. Now everybody in Manhattan, everybody in the civilized world, and it can be done almost.
Turns on the valve.
No, they turn a valve and out comes pure water.
Yeah.
And you turn the other valve and it comes out warm water. And that's something we can provide for everybody. It doesn't have to be just some king where you carried buckets of water to let them have a thing where the others have to wallow around in a mud bath or something. Yeah. So the progress up the scale of being able to provide for the material capability of technology provides could make, so you got a world where you could get everybody living a life of a have. Okay. On their own terms. Well, that's never been available to us. It still isn't yet. But we're getting there.
Well, let's take
So that's two sides of an equation that we are born into with this generation, ours, and then the younger generation coming along.
Okay, so let's take an example of what I'm doing right now.
Okay.
I had 57 years of consulting to the biggest corporations in the world.
Yeah, I know.
I've consolidated it down to my agency called the International Agency of Economic Development.
Right.
And I wrote a letter to all the ambassadors of the least developed countries.
Uh-huh.
And I said two sentences. One is they don't know how to do it. And the second sentence was, don't you think if they knew how to do it, they would have done it for your country by now? And the point of that, the essence of it is the United Nations, you can look on the website, set up in 1970 the least developed countries in the world. And they identified, along with the U.S. and all the smart professors, identified that there were 24 countries, least developed countries. And their goal, right on the web, as you can see it at the UN, their goal in 1970 was that in 10 years' time they would reduce the 24 countries to half, 12 countries.
12, yeah.
And as of 2016, they've been every year analyzing it. So it's not 10 years later, 70, 80, it's 2016. The latest report is they did not reduce the 24 to 12. They, in fact, increased the 24 to 48.
I'll be damned, really.
So President of the United States right now says, we're not going to be doing country building. The United Nations says we don't know how to do country building because they haven't been doing it. And the federal government says we don't know how to do it. So I'm saying they don't know how to do it.
Well,
but here's what they know how to do. I've been all over the world, and as you know, working for the big corporations in every country. And a country's like, you could say it's like a pie. And in it comes the American corporations. And they do what they do. Coca-Cola, IBM, you name it. And every place I go, I say,
Japan,
no, not that.
Well, they
it's
do.
American corporation. Yeah, they did that. Right. Okay. Now what happens is that works good for our companies, and it works really good for a few people who make a lot of money.
That's the
it
traditional
sucks
way.
the other half's money into the product.
Yeah, well, that's on the assumption of the historical pattern.
My focus, that's what I'm doing right now. My focus is focus on the least developed countries and pick that side up.
Yeah, that's good.
And the reason they're not American corporations, just like the Trump and like the government and like the United Nations all say we're not going to do country building because they don't know how to do it. The American corporations do not know how to do it. I see what they do. I like what they do for that segment of the country, and those are valuable. But the reason they don't do it the other way is one of my formulas that I calculated after 57 years working with the biggest corporations. And it's a rule. And here's the rule. When in life, like in business, when in business or life, when you do not know what to do, you do what you know what to do.
Yeah, right.
And they're good at doing what they do, but they slaughter the other rest of the society.
Yeah, right.
So how do we pick them up and get them out of that slavery and jobs?
That's the lesson of history and of evolution. That's an evolutionary lesson we had to come over. But one of the things is the technology goes on. The technology goes and the dimensions of this, and the capability is the capability of the technologies that has to be realized. And one of the problems that hasn't been allowed to do is they got to hold to all the old ways in which the system is set up, and that includes being able to have everyone be essentially submissive to the established way in which the powerful rule, and the masses do what they have to, and that there is some progress being made But what this is heralding, the robotization, is they're not going to need the people to do production. They needed to have people on the assembly line to turn out Ford cars. They don't need them anymore.
Are they going to discard them then?
Well, no, but what they're going to have to do is get an alternate way for people to have income to clear the market.
Good.
If in market terms. The people are important as consumers of what can be produced of the good life. They got to have a way of getting buying power into the hands of the people.
You're right at the right
point. And
point.
that's a possibility of a forming capital in a way where the ownership of the assets that are creating the wealth and the technology are held by everybody in a capitalist way, or including a capitalist understanding, as well as some left-wing thinking about justice and so forth. And we got to get to that to where we will have a resonating of a liberated humanity, everybody realizing their own potentiality that will resonate and create, as does evolution itself, a synergy, a behavior of systems more unpredictable by the sum of parts of a maximally engaged humanity, or jam session writ large in the universe, that is relevant to introducing us to a new way of being in universe. We're speciating, we're coming into a new relationship into the universe that is the offing, and it's like evolution. We may just cut it short, but that's something that's available to us, and these things of the robotics is something that could perhaps lead us in that direction. We're at a time of qualitative, not quantitative transformation. We got to get over being in debt to the historical patterns that are outdated, and we got to get to a pattern where we can. We're at a most incredibly exciting time ever to have been born into this universe.
I got to get this in because you mentioned
Hurry up, we only got 1 minute left.
So that's all we need.
Use haiku.
That's all we need. The question,
do not tell me
the question
I
is,
am
how do the rich keep getting the money? Is it through jobs? Do they have jobs?
Well, no, they're going to realize that.
What is it that they have?
They're going to realize that
you said it before. I want you to say it again.
They're going to realize they're going to have a way of expanding capital ownership of the means of production, being robotics and other things, to everybody as a way of distributing to everybody, which is in their advantage, buying power to buy the things that can be produced because their labor is no longer needed as wage slaves.
And you've interviewed Kelso, and what did Kelso say?
Well, he's got a system of doing that. But one of the problems in this universe or any other, as you can see from the credit roll, Josiane is now running the graphics, and so we've come to the end of that. But anyway, I think this is something worth thinking about, and it's an incredible time to have been born and to this universe, and it's got a lot of challenges. Thank you for all the good work and everything. It's so good to see you. Welcome back to MNN. Thank you, Josiane. Thank you, everyone, for viewing. It's an amazingly interesting time to have been born, and a really challenging one. I'm all for liberating rather than annihilating the human species and the people, others that are on our trail. I think it's an important thing to be able to see that and to try and bring it about. Thank you for viewing. We'll be coming back again tomorrow, so thanks a lot for viewing. And, well, that's it. And thank you, Larry, for coming in. And thank you, Josiane, as always, for the production. Thank you. And that's it. Yeah, that's it. Okay. Cut.
Okay.
Cut. Okay.